Hello! I'm excited to talk to you about how I plan on modeling some of my classroom norms for my students this year. I'd originally thought about doing a thing where I film it from two different angles and act out as the student from one and myself as the other. I quickly realized I do not have the video editing skills to do that, or quite frankly, probably the acting skills to do that type of thing. So hopefully, just me walking you through will be sufficient. Some of the things I decided to focus on were the kinds of classroom norms that I think me and my students will come up with together as we're doing the activity. As I talked about in the paragraph and in my tool from last week, in the past I've focused on respect and centered my classroom ideas about respect and how we show respect in a bunch of different ways for a bunch of different groups. And I plan on doing the same thing this year, but with empathy. And for this activity, I decided to focus on how the students can show empathy for others who are taking this class and other classes by taking care of the materials and the tools, particularly paintbrushes and palettes, because of those are the things that get destroyed, have been destroyed in my classroom. The second one was how can we show empathy for our peers? And specifically, I can show empathy for my peers by not touching them. And then the final one was I can show empathy for myself by not engaging in negative self-talk. And before I dive into the breakdown of each of those, I did want to really quick mention that in the past I've just generated these lists and put them up, and they've been fairly long lists because you have like 5 different categories, and then you have 5 or 6 things in each category. And I think that's good because I think the conversation around generating those lists has been good, because especially about an idea of respect or empathy, I think the kids don't necessarily understand what that means. We as teachers take for granted that they do, but they really don't. They really don't know what it means to show respect for each other, and they really don't know what it means to show empathy for each other unless we talk about it. And so that's been one way that I've modeled in the past, is by having that conversation. But the downside is it generates these long lists, and then because there's so many things on there, and the way that I enforce them are different, because some of them, for instance, this idea of negative self-talk, is not something that I'm ever going to really send a letter home about. It's not something that they're going to get in trouble. It's not that they ever would get written up for, or get a referral for. It's just something that I think we as a class need to work on. Whereas other things, like touching other students, I mean, that is something that would end up as a referral pretty quickly, or and definitely if it's something that's happening over and over again, it needs to go to a call home. And so what I plan on doing this year is doing the same kind of activity, generating the same kinds of lists, but letting the students know up front, like, look, we're going to have these big overarching ideas that we're working on as a class, but we're going to pick 5 or 6 of them that are the main things that we need to focus on, that have some pretty immediate consequences if they're not followed, um, and put those up. And then throughout the year, if there's some of them that end up not being a problem in the class, like we all have it down, well, maybe that one rotates off and something else can rotate on that has started to be kind of more of a problem in the classroom. And so that's how I plan on doing this big picture going into next year. So starting off with, I can show empathy for the others who take this class by taking care of the paintbrushes and palettes. So what I plan to do for that one is during some of the first days, I will have a really quick, fun painting activity of some sorts, where we are getting out the brushes and we're using the palettes, and we're going to do something really quick with them so that we can do like 15, 20 minutes and get done. That way we'll have a good bunch of class at the end where I can start to model how do we clean these things up. So once we're done with the activity, I'll say, okay, before we go clean these up, I want to talk about this. This is one of our norms, and I'll point it out up on the list. And then I'll say, it's really important that we do this because it's gotten completely out of hand. In the past, we've destroyed a bunch of paintbrushes, a bunch of palettes, and so I want to just walk you through step by step, how does this work? And so I'll say, at the end of class, I'm going to say, okay, we've got 5 minutes. Everybody needs to get all their paintbrushes and their palettes clean before we can leave. And then I will say, and then at that point, you would go back and clean them. So I need a volunteer. one of you needs to come up and be the teacher. So I'll pick a student and say, okay, they're the teacher, and I'm say, okay, you go ahead and do that however you would like. How would you release us to clean? And so that student will go ahead and do it, and then I, taking part as the student, will get the palette and the brush, take it back to the back sink, and I'll say, okay, everybody come with me because I'm going to show you what you do as a student. I'll take them back there, turn on the sink, show them how you massage the bristles of the brush until there's no more color coming out. Show them how you turn down the pressure on the sink to put the palette under so you don't spray paint all over yourself. Use your thumb to scrape paint out of the individual circles in the palette, and then rinse that until there's no color coming off. I'll point out to them the sign on the sink that says we do not leave materials in the sink. Show them where the dish drain is. Show them how to put the palette and the brush in the dish drain. Importantly, after I do that, I will have warned them beforehand, say like, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to pick one of you at random, and you're going to need to do this too for the whole class so they can see. Then I'll choose some method to choose a random student. I'll do that, and I'll have them say, okay, I'm back to being the teacher. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead and get everything cleaned up, and I'll have them walk through how they get that all cleaned up. Another thing that I might do in order as far as modeling goes is show them that, hey, look, we can have 2 people washing out the bristles of their brush in the sink at the same time, because I think a lot of times they get piled up. I only have one sink in my classroom, and show them, model to them that, look, we can multitask to get this job done.